So I'm here with John Russ, the former chair of Roseacre Farms, who's currently running against Jim Banks for the Republican nomination to take Mike Braun's seat in the Senate. That being said, he's run into a bit of trouble with the Indiana Elections Commission ruling him ineligible to run as a result of his voting history. Can you talk a bit about that and how your campaign has responded?
Yes. Well, today I'm not on the ballot. So, I am back in the Indiana Supreme Court, well, as of yesterday to get back on, but we'll get into that later. The reason they took me off the ballot is I did not meet what's called the two primary rule, which in the state of Indiana, you have to vote in two primaries in a row to be on the ballot automatically, or you have to have your county chair sign off. And I did not meet the two primary rule because, well, one, I did not vote in Republican primaries. I voted in one in 2016, and I hadn't voted in one before that since for a decade ago, I think, was my last one. And that was a Democrat back in the day when I was voting for a guy named Jerry and my brother who ran for office. And I wanted to support him, of course, but it's here nor there. I've always been a Republican. I have only 100% given to the Republican Party all of my life. I've never given $1 to the Democrats. I think I'm actually much more conservative than my opponent. I believe in actual limited government. I do not believe government should be picking winners and losers. So that all being said, when I got into this race, I thought, well, this is not going to be a problem. Everyone knows me in Jackson County, and it's no secret that my family is very conservative. We get attacked by left-wing groups all the time. Why anyone would say I'm left-wing is beyond me. We had the Animal Liberation Front bomb one of our farms one time. They burned up one of our feed trucks, and in 2000, and just to think that anyone thinks a successful farmer is going to be a left-wing whatever it's not credible in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. So did you know the other Democrat that you voted for? I believe I remember reading somewhere that you did.
Jerry.
And so your basis of voting for him was also supporting someone that you knew, I assume?
Yeah, I went to church with him. His daughter was in my confirmation class, and he was a very strong proponent of agribusiness. He was just very strong for agriculture. And I felt back then that it was important to keep, as many Democrats at the local level that were pro-business and pro-ag in as you possibly could. And that's purely why I voted for him back in the day.
Right, that makes sense. So then what about 20?
But he passed away, unfortunately, and after that, I did not vote, for obviously anymore. And right. I just wasn't that political. I've always been busy being a farmer. And what got me into this was, frankly, what happened during COVID. And that's ironically when the two-party rule was put in place. During COVID, we saw this government overreach where the state of Indiana especially went out and closed churches. Right. They closed restaurants. They closed, universities. They kept liquor stores open, oddly. It was... I saw it firsthand what happened. Our family's business was decimated by it. We lost so much business. We had to sell one of our farms in Texas. Mm-hmm. We had to sell our soybean meal processing plant here in Seymour, Indiana, just to, make it. And so I know firsthand what government overreach does. And that's ironically, or not ironically, that's when the career politicians in the state house of Indiana passed the two primary rule, because I think they realized people like me were going to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on is wrong. We need people in politics and in positions of power that understand the ramifications of it, other than just for, keeping a political office. And right. So I think, that's purely why I think they're trying to keep me off the ballot. And I'm off the ballot today. That's where it is.
Yeah. And I have friends that have also not met the two primary rule, but have gotten approved by their local party chair.
Right.
So
right. And right. On mine on that, I didn't, I talked to my county chair and I didn't think it was going to be a problem at all. Talking to her, I actually asked her, I believe, to be my campaign treasurer back in January of 2023, when I started thinking about running, because I thought, well, what do? You call your local county chair and, start lining up what you need to do. And she says, oh yeah, it wouldn't be a problem. And never, it was always a very positive, wonderful thing that I was running until I actually signed up to run, and then, alarm bells went off in Washington that, hey, there's someone running for the US Senate that we don't control. We got to stop that. And what I don't, there's lots of other races in Indiana. We have 5 candidates running for governor. There's all kinds of congressional races all across Indiana where there's, several candidates, 8 and 9 candidates in some districts running for office. But in the US Senate, the Republican Party is saying, no, we cannot have anyone else other than, my opponent. And I think that's the interesting thing there. Why are they doing that? Why are they so scared of anyone? I should be, in my opinion, I should be easy to beat. I'm an outsider. I mean, I'm not an experienced, polished politician. I'm going to speak frankly, and you'll ask me questions, and I may, I'm going to give you a blunt answer just because that's who I am. I'm not a politician.
Right. So what was it about 2016 that made it so important that you had to vote in the Republican primary?
I really supported Ted Cruz, as ironically, so did my opponent, Jim Banks. We both gave, well, at least I gave financially, I thought a lot of money to Ted Cruz because I wanted a true conservative. I thought he was exciting to have a real outspoken conservative because he had been an outspoken conservative in the United States Senate. And I just thought, well, he's going to be the guy that can really, have a true conservative in Washington. But as it turned out, Donald Trump got in and I think did an awesome job as president. So I was very, very pleased and 100% supported, Donald Trump in 2016. My opponent only voted for Trump with reservations. I didn't. I voted wholeheartedly for Donald Trump. I absolutely believe Donald Trump sincerely wanted a border wall in 2016. And that is the most important issue facing Indiana today and the entire country is this border wall. In 2016, 17, and 18, all these career politicians in Congress were opposed to Trump actually building the border wall. The border wall cost, the high estimate back then, I think, was $21 billion. And, that's nothing compared to what the cost is per year for what we're doing for, illegals, in hotels in New York City and paying for their airfare now to fly around the country.
As well. I recently read that the costs of healthcare are astronomical.
I think it's $350 billion a year.
Yeah, that's insane. And then, that, of course, affects prices for everyone else as well. So on that note, being in agriculture yourself, I'm sure you're familiar with there's many sectors of the agricultural industry that depend on, to some extent, legal immigration. So how would you go about, while, addressing human trafficking on the border and the border crisis in general, reducing barriers to legal immigration, if that's something that you're passionate about, so people can have the opportunity to come to America and work if they so choose?
We have to have legal immigration, but it cannot be illegal. And that's a key point that's lost. My family's business, we have been sued and fined by the United States government for asking for too much ID from people at work, that we thought may be illegal. And so we asked for ID. We got sued by the government for asking for that. That's wrong. People have to follow the law. If you're coming to the United States, you have to go through a process. You have to prove, that one, you're financially capable of supporting yourself. You have to prove that you're going to, go out and work and contribute. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be coming here. We're not, this isn't just open doors for anyone that wants to come. In America, we believe in work. We believe in, individual liberty. We believe in individual contribution. It's one of the reasons I'm Republican. I do not believe in the government choosing who's a winner and loser in life. It should be up to the individual.
Right. Speaking of lawsuits, I know it's been mentioned in the process of your campaign that Roseacre Farms got sued a while back for, I guess, fixing the price of eggs. And then I also know in your platform, you talk about antitrust laws being used by big business against agriculture. Could you explain more about that position? And
yeah, the antitrust laws have been twisted in a way to make farmers like us look bad when we try to make a decent price for our eggs. Okay, so there's a jury in Chicago, and what they found was that we charged 2 cents. The amount of egg, for instance, in a jar of mayonnaise is about 17, 18 cents. what that entire lawsuit was over is not, it was over 2 cents of that.
Mm,
And that 2 cents was everything to do with what's called animal care guidelines, where we had to remove chickens from our cages to allow the chickens to have more space. Do you remember I was talking about the Animal Liberation Front,
right.
burned up one of our feed trucks? Um, what, long story short, the animal rights movement forced Unilever and Kraft, these giant corporations, to only buy eggs from farms that quote unquote treated their animals more humanely, which we of course did because we had to. If we wanted to sell eggs to Kraft or Unilever, or Nestle, these giant $300 billion corporations, we had to do exactly what they told us. So we did exactly what they told us, and then they sued us for doing what they told us to do. So they told us to remove the chickens from the cages to allow more space, which we did. But they say that caused the egg price to come up. However, during that entire time while we were doing that, my family's farm, Rose Acres, we were adding chicken houses to the ends of our farms so that we actually increased the total number of chickens we had. We went from, I believe, 16 million chickens to 21 million chickens during that same time. We increased the egg supply for the nation. And as a result, we caused egg prices to go lower in the United States, not higher. And so, it is, it's not surprising to me now, but unfortunately, politicians, will say anything to get elected. And I get that from my opponent, but it's wrong. My family, we've worked our entire lives to keep egg prices low. When my dad started selling eggs in 1948 and 49 on the Indianapolis farmers market, he was getting about 50 cents a dozen. If you adjust that for inflation today, that would be over $6 a dozen. Today, the price we're getting before Easter, right now, this is a peak time for egg usage. We're getting about $2 a dozen today. So we're getting 1/3 the price my dad was getting, in 1948, 49, 50. So, and it's because of large agribusiness. It's because of these large egg farms. So if you go down by Rensselaer, Remington, Brook, North Vernon, Seymour, and drive by our farms, you see these large mammoth farms, and they are producing eggs at an incredibly economic price for people. And that's why when you go into the grocery store, you can pick up a dozen of eggs today at Walmart and Seymour. They're $2.48 a dozen. If you go to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you're going to pay at least double that. So I mean, eggs are still an incredible value.
Right. And going back to antitrust laws just in general, if they are used appropriately, I know in your platform you mentioned fair trade as being something you're passionate about. Do you think
Yes.
that they might have a role in punishing businesses that outsource jobs, or in businesses that don't exactly line up with the free market, like defense contracting? I know you also mentioned in your platform cost efficiency in defense spending, and then healthcare doesn't always fit within the free market. So could strengthening antitrust laws help in those instances?
Yes, absolutely. I think I'm on mute. Is that right? Can you hear me? There.
I
Oh,
can hear you.
I just had my mouse over it. Sorry. No, for instance, just in healthcare, there's these things called PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, which are these middlemen between the giant Eli Lilly's and Merck's of the world and your local pharmacies, like the Family Drug here in Seymour or CVS. They actually set the price. And those companies are actually owned by the large chains like CVS and Walgreens, and they set the price for what a local independent drugstore can get, for their drugs. So Family Drug has to charge this astronomical rate for a drug that used to be $25, and they'll raise it, several $100s just because they can. That's wrong. We have to have the free market, and it boils back to it's just a basic government philosophy. And that's why I've always been a conservative. I do not think the government should be picking winners and losers. The government should be protecting, the individual pharmacies from the large pharmacies. It should be protecting competition, not discouraging competition.
Right. And then another thing you mentioned in your platform is not messing with the retirement age. I know we've seen several people on the right talk about, raising that age of retirement. But for Social Security to remain solvent for the next generation, it does seem like it will need some sort of reform unless we can, change the demographic factors that are underlying that insolvency or potential future insolvency. So would you support reforms like maybe removing the payroll tax cap, or perhaps taking a note out of Sweden's book and doing some sort of partial privatization?
I am really not wild about privatization. I think that opens up too much room for corruption and things that can get twisted around. I'm a strong believer in Social Security. I'm from Seymour, Indiana. And let me give this story real quick. John Cougar Mellencamp's from Seymour. I've never met him, but his mom was my mail lady back in the 1980s. And he was already a famous rock star, really wealthy and all that. She kept working, and she kept working because she wanted to get her full postal retirement benefit. She did not want to stop and just say, well, my son's rich now, I don't have to work. She earned that. She worked her whole life for that. And so I think the answer on that is you can't go out and say, oh, we're going to raise the retirement age for people. And, Donald Trump has said the same thing now. And I think we have to protect that. And how you solve that is by taxing goods for coming in from foreign countries that are not paying the tax that American companies are paying. We have all these Chinese goods coming into the United States. They're not paying Social Security tax on that. They're not paying Medicare tax on that. They're not paying income tax on that. The workers they're paying, they're getting, $1 an hour or whatever it is. In China, that's not fair to American workers. And I see that. And that's why I think one of the reasons they're, trying so hard to keep me off the ballot, because I think it's just common sense. You have to treat everyone equally. And I think it's equal treatment for goods coming in from China to meet the same tax structure that American manufacturers have to meet.
Right. Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. Speaking of you being off the ballot right now, I meant to ask this a little bit earlier, but if your plea to the court doesn't end up working out, would you consider running as an independent? Is that even possible, or through like a third party?
I don't think that's possible. I sincerely believe I will be back on the ballot, hopefully by the end of this week. With the Indiana State Supreme Court had a 3-2 decision against me. It was very evenly split. And one of the people in the majority had a concurring opinion, and his concurring opinion stated a lot of things that were just factually inaccurate. So we hope that, he will see that, what he based his ruling on is just not factually accurate, and that he will change his mind, and hopefully I'll be back on the ballot in the next week.
Okay. So they're currently considering that right now.
Yes, that's right now. That was just filed yesterday, and it's to get the record straight. And also, the Indiana State Supreme Court did not take into consideration at all the ruling on Donald Trump that kept Colorado from removing him from the ballot. And that ruling clearly stated that federal candidates cannot be removed by state courts or state legislatures against, that are on the ballot. And I was on the ballot, and I was removed from the ballot. So it's an identical situation.
That's good to know. So then going back to your platform, you do mention education. Not much about higher education. I don't know if you were familiar with this, but the State House recently saw Senate Bill, now Senate Enrolled Act 202 go through, that was all about making intellectual diversity part of like tenure considerations. So what would you want to do as a senator to increase intellectual diversity in higher education and make sure everyone, regardless of their political or religious affiliation, feels comfortable expressing what they believe?
Well, I think everything in life should be based on merit and not just on diversity. That's, when you say diversity to me, that raises a red flag instantly. And, it's because it's a bogeyman for putting people in power or place that don't deserve to be there because they haven't worked for it. I believe you have to work for it. Education, whatever you get in life, it should be based on ability and how hard you work for it, not based on any skin color or sexual orientation or anything. It should be based purely on ability.
Right. Do you feel like conservatives to some extent, though, are, discriminated against when it comes to higher education and tenure considerations or things of that nature?
I think as long as the rules are always based on ability, irregardless of what your political philosophy is, I'm okay with it. It has to be based on ability. It can't be based on what your party is or what your political orientation is. It has to be based on, merit.
Right. Okay. So then going to cultural issues, your platform says you're pro-life. So would you support any legislation on a national level putting limits on
Yes.
or banning abortion?
Yes.
What?
Yes, I actually support Mike Pence had, I thought, a really good idea, and this is important to me. I am pro-life. He supported a national federal 15-week ban on abortion. And I think that's supported by over 80% of the population. It's just common sense that you don't, abort. That's ending life.
Right.
And it's wrong. And you have to protect the innocent. And we can't have really good abortion laws in Indiana, which I think we have now, but not in New York State, where they're allowing abortion up to almost childbirth. It's inhumane,
Right.
and I don't support that. And I think you have, I don't think it's should be a state right to decide, whether a child lives or not. I think that's a federal right to live.
Right. Yeah, and I think most European countries tend to draw the line at like 15 weeks as well. But there has been some
But I
criticism.
absolutely support Indiana's much more,
Right.
conservative position on that.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. I absolutely support that.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some criticism on the 15-week ban. I believe the numbers was people said it would still allow about 90% of abortions. So would you have any response to that? Like, would you still support it?
If we could do more, that would be great. But I think realistically, we have to do something that would get enough support to actually pass.
Right. That's fair.
And I think that would actually have a shot at passage. And it's just inhumane, these late abortions that they're doing right now, the partial birth and stuff like that.
Right.
That's wrong.
Yeah. So along with that, your platform also mentions incentives to for women who are pregnant or to continue with their pregnancy. Like I think you had adoption support and other things like that.
Right.
What sort of reforms would you support to help children, after they're born, just to create a culture of life?
Well, we have to always make sure that young children are taken care of. We have to make sure they get the proper nutrition. We have to encourage adoption. And I'm always 100% for, just basic decency on that regard. And I think that gets lost by people, that say, well, you're pro-life or pro-choice or whatever. No, it always has to be for what's best for the child and what's best for the family.
Yeah.
I have some controversial views on social issues. I happen to be gay, married to a guy, but I personally believe marriage is between a man and a woman. What I want is equal rights in front of the government. I don't think you or anyone else should be forced to recognize what I have as going against your religious beliefs.
Right.
That's okay.
Right.
I just want equal treatment in front of the law. And I
Right.
think that's lost on a lot of people. And it's just about, basic decency. I don't believe, drag queens should be out in public. I think that is being indecent to women. And,
Right.
it's the same as blackface. And, I know I can't believe that's controversial to say that today. No one cares what anyone does behind closed doors. Just don't do it in front of your kids. Don't do it in front of children.
Right. And kind of connecting those issues. I know a lot of people on both sides of the abortion issue gave support to the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization because it gave states the opportunity to make their own laws about abortion again, since Roe v. Wade had really by judicial fiat kind of removed most state laws on abortion. Some would also point out that Obergefell versus Hodges did sort of the same thing with, making states have to recognize same-sex marriage. How would you respond to that, or do you believe Obergefell may have been decided incorrectly for the same reasons?
I think it all boils back down to equal treatment under the law in front of government. And,
Mhm.
I just am never going to say that you or a church or, my church or any person has to recognize something they disagree with. We're adults in this world, and, it's okay if you disagree with me on something or, that's just where I'm at on it. But I think in front of the government, we're all equal and we have to stay equal. And it can't be based on skin color or sexual orientation. I don't believe in special rights, especially. I think that's abhorrent. If a owner of a bakery does not want to bake a cake for someone because they disagree with them, I am completely okay with that. There's other places that will bake a cake for that bakery. Let them do what they want to do with their life. They can't be forced to do something they shouldn't or they don't want to do.
I asked you earlier about how we can use policies to create a culture of life. How do you think Christians can do that in their daily lives and in their interactions with others? And then do you think the church could be doing more in that degree to help sort of step in and fix or try to fix the social and economic issues that we face as a country?
Well, it's one of the reasons I'm running, and it's just because I believe we are all called and we all have to meet with God someday, and he's going to pass judgment on me. What did I do with my time on earth? And that's what everyone on this planet has to recognize, is everything we have here is fleeting. It is inconsequential to God's plan. We have to do what's right always. And I just uphold to that. And if you want to know how I will be in the United States Senate, it will be that basic tenet. It's always about decency and doing the right thing and not being beholden to, anyone other than yourself and to your fellow man.
Mhm. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sitting
I
down.
haven't, you want to do a controversial one real quick?
Were none of those controversial?
Oh, well, I don't mind getting into it. There was a bill passed in Congress last week that, is going after social apps
Mhm.
for,
Like TikTok.
right, for being, forbidden or whatever. My take on that is government should not ever be censoring any website or app. And what I don't like about that bill that passed last week is that gives the power to President Biden to really shut down any website he doesn't like if he can claim it's owned by,
Mhm.
whoever.
Right.
That's
Right.
wrong. I
Mhm.
think the big thing is on technology. We all have these cell phones, that technology itself should not be allowed to harvest your information without your express permission, not just a quick screen. Oh yeah, you got to agree to this, whatever. It's,
Right.
no, the Chinese government should never be allowed to be tracking, your location with your cell phone.
Mhm.
The Chinese government should not be allowed to be listening in on your microphone. And these cell phones do that. They listen in on your conversations, without your permission. So if you're walking in a grocery store and you talk about, needing to do the laundry, you're going to start seeing ads pop up for Tide or whatever.
Right.
That's not right. We have to get, I believe in the individual rights, not the right of corporations to spy on us, and certainly not the right of China to spy on us. And that's happening right now. And it's not just through one app, it's happening across all apps. And that's why I think we have to address, sorry, the root of the problem and not just go after one app because it's happening in all the apps.
Right. If I remember correctly, did you have a view in your platform about foreign ownership of land, like Chinese ownership? And if
Yeah,
so,
I do not believe Chinese should be owning our, farmland at all.
right,
It has,
would you
support.
say that they're any different in terms of, banning Chinese ownership of TikTok and banning like Chinese ownership of land?
Well, that's our food supply.
Right.
And, that's an element of control, for freedom of speech. If one app gets banned, that's political thought up here. And
Right.
that's what I don't like about that.
Okay, so you maybe one's more essential, like the land is our food supply, so
Well,
that's
we have to eat.
right,
And,
right, and
we
then
can't, we have to, have an economical food supply. And that's one of the reasons, I'm in this, because I know exactly where the Chinese are trying to control our food supply. So have you heard about bird flu?
mhm,
2 years ago in 2022, egg prices went through the roof because we lost so many chickens to bird flu. Over 55 million chickens in the United States died as a result of avian influenza. You know why that is? We are not allowed to vaccinate against it.
hmm,
There's a vaccine against bird flu. The Chinese, ironically or not ironically, vaccinate their chickens against it, but ban the importation of any chicken meat, broilers, they're called broilers, to China
hmm,
from any country that vaccinates their own chickens against avian influenza. Why
wow,
is that? It's because they want to see the price fluctuation. They want to see our birds wiped out, and our leaders in Washington won't do anything about it because the egg industry is very small in the grand scheme of things. We're just not that big of a deal compared to the broilers. And so they're protecting the broiler industry at the expense of the egg industry. And who pays the price for that is consumers. That's when egg prices did go, through the roof. And, we repopulated and eggs are back down inexpensive again. But I mean, that took a lot of, economic turmoil and a lot of work on our part to get the prices back down. And we could keep the prices down more if we could vaccinate for it. And it's a simple thing, but because the Chinese are not allowing us to vaccinate, we can't do that. And that's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any other questions for you. So thank
Okay.
you so much for sitting down with me and interviewing.
Okay.
We're about out of time with the Zoom meeting. But yeah, thank you so much again, and definitely look forward to seeing what happens with your campaign and if you get
Yep.
back on the ballot.